Ever wonder what happens when a Western ditches sunshine for snowstorms and villains actually win? The Great Silence shattered every rule of the genre, from mute heroes to audience members literally shooting at the screen in rage. This bleak masterpiece hides secrets that make its brutal ending seem tame by comparison. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about The Great Silence. Fact 1. The hero became mute. By accident. When Jean-Louis Trintignant signed on to star in The Great Silence, nobody anticipated that a simple language barrier would end up creating one of the most iconic characters in Western film history. The French actor had just come off the massive international success of A Man and a Woman in 1966, which made him a hot commodity for European productions. However, Trintignant faced a significant problem when he arrived on set. He couldn't speak Italian, and the film was being shot in Italy with an Italian crew. He also didn't speak English, which was typically used during filming for international distribution purposes. Most spaghetti westerns were filmed without live sound anyway, with actors often just counting numbers while the camera rolled, and all dialogue would be dubbed in later during post-production. Still, directors needed actors who could at least mouth the right language for dubbing purposes. Director Sergio Corbucci found himself in a tricky situation, but rather than replace his star or struggle through the production, he came up with an elegant solution that completely transformed the film. He simply decided to make Trintignant's character entirely mute. The character, aptly named Silence, would never speak a single word throughout the entire movie. This wasn't part of the original script, but Corbucci, who was known for creating characters with physical disabilities or unique traits, saw an opportunity. By making Silence a mute gunslinger who had his throat cut as a child, the film gained an extra layer of tragedy and mystery. Trintignant later admitted that he had actually requested this change himself, telling Corbucci he would only do a Western if he didn't have to speak, because Italian Westerns had too much talking and he found the dialogue ridiculous. Either way, what started as a practical problem became one of the film's most distinctive and powerful creative choices. Fact 2. Franco Nero said no. First, before Jean-Louis Trintignant ever became the silent gunslinger at the heart of this bleak masterpiece, the role was actually written for someone else entirely. Director Sergio Corbucci initially wanted Franco Nero, the Italian actor who had become a spaghetti western icon after starring in Corbucci's own Django just 2 years earlier in 1966. Django had been a massive hit, making Nero one of the most recognizable faces in the genre, and it seemed natural that Corbucci would want to reunite with his star for another groundbreaking western. The Great Silence had even started, as a potential Django sequel meant to continue the adventures of the mud-soaked gunslinger in a snowy setting. However, Franco Nero turned down the opportunity because he was already committed to another film project and couldn't fit The Great Silence into his schedule. This rejection forced the production team to scramble for a replacement, and they turned to French actor Jean-Louis Trintignant instead. At the time, Trintignant was much better known for sophisticated European art films than for genre pictures, having just starred in the romantic drama A Man and a Woman, which became one of the most successful French films ever made internationally. His casting represented a significant departure from the typical spaghetti western star. Where Franco Nero had a rugged, physical presence perfect for action roles, Trintignant brought a more introspective and vulnerable quality to the character. This change in casting completely altered the tone of the film. If Nero had played Silence, the character likely would have been more traditionally heroic and physically imposing. Instead, Trintignant's Silence became a more enigmatic and tragic figure, and the mute aspect of the character only enhanced this quality. Fact 3. 26 tons of shaving cream created snow. One of the most visually striking elements of The Great Silence is its snow-covered landscape, which made it stand out dramatically from other spaghetti westerns that were typically set in hot, dusty desert environments. The film was shot on location in the Italian Dolomites Mountains, where real snow provided the stunning backdrop for outdoor scenes. However, when it came time to film the town scenes at the Helios Film Studio in Rome, the production faced a significant challenge. There was no snow anywhere near the studio, and they needed the town of Snow Hill to look convincingly buried in winter weather. The solution was both creative and bizarre. The crew used 26 tons of shaving cream to create artificial snow throughout the town set. That's roughly 52,000 pounds of shaving cream spread across the streets, rooftops, and buildings to simulate a snowbound frontier town. To make this fake snow look as realistic as possible, most of the Snow Hill town scenes were deliberately filmed at night. The darkness helped disguise the fact that shaving cream doesn't quite have the same texture and appearance as real snow, and the limited lighting made it much harder to spot the difference. For daytime scenes that had to be shot at the studio, the crew employed additional tricks, including swathing the entire set in fog and mist to obscure the surrounding countryside, which obviously had no snow at all. They also used camera overexposure techniques to wash out details that might reveal the artificial nature of their winter wonderland. The combination of all these techniques created a convincing illusion of a town trapped in the grip of a brutal blizzard. Meanwhile, the real snow, scenes filmed in the Dolomites presented their own technical challenges, with freezing temperatures interfering with camera operation and film speeds. Act 4. Studio head literally swallowed his cigar. When the finished film was screened for Darryl F. Zanuck, the legendary co-founder and production chief of 20th Century Fox, the studio executive was so shocked by what he witnessed that he reportedly had a physical reaction that has become part of Hollywood legend. Zanuck had been watching the film to determine whether Fox should distribute it in the American market, as the studio had acquired the distribution rights with hopes of capitalizing on the success of spaghetti westerns in the United States. Throughout the screening, Zanuck sat smoking a cigar, as was his habit during film viewings. But when the film reached its devastating finale, where the hero Silence is gunned down along with all the innocent outlaws he was trying to protect, Zanuck was so stunned and offended by the bleak, nihilistic ending that witnesses claim he literally swallowed the cigar he had been smoking. Whether he actually swallowed it entirely or just choked on it in shock varies depending on who tells the story. But the core truth remains the same. Zanuck hated the ending with a passion. Immediately after the screening ended, he declared that 20th Century Fox would never release the picture in the United States or England. He found the film's downbeat conclusion completely unacceptable for American audiences, who expected their Western heroes to triumph over evil. The idea of villains winning and good people dying without justice or redemption was antithetical to everything Hollywood Westerns represented. This decision effectively killed the film's chances for American distribution for more than 3 decades. It wasn't until 2001 that The Great Silence finally became available in the United States through a DVD release, and it took until 2012 for the film to receive its first proper theatrical run in America. Fact 5. An angry viewer shot the screen. The Great Silence had a difficult reception in its home country of Italy, where audiences were completely unprepared for its shocking finale. The film received an 18 rating due to its graphic violence, which included bloody headshots and thumbs being blown off, and this restricted rating meant that young Italians who typically loved spaghetti westerns couldn't even see it in theaters. The older audiences who were allowed to watch it weren't particularly happy with what they got. Italian moviegoers in 1968 expected their westerns to follow certain conventions, even the violent and cynical spaghetti westerns that had become popular. Heroes might be morally ambiguous anti-heroes, but they were supposed to win in the end, or at least go down fighting in a blaze of glory that felt meaningful. The Great Silence shattered those expectations completely with its ending, where the wounded hero fails to save anyone and is coldly executed along with the woman he loves and all the innocent people he was trying to protect. During one particular screening in Sicily, an audience member became so enraged by this bleak conclusion that he pulled out an actual firearm and shot at the movie screen. This wasn't a case of someone firing a gun into the air in anger or shooting at the ceiling. According to reports, the viewer literally aimed at the screen itself, presumably at the image of Klaus Kinski's villain Loco, who survives and triumphs at the end. The incident has become one of the most famous audience reaction stories in cinema history, illustrating just how powerfully the film affected viewers who felt betrayed by its refusal to deliver the cathartic ending they craved. This violent audience response only added to the film's reputation as too dark and controversial. Fact 6. Klaus Kinski used anti-Semitic slurs for method acting. Klaus Kinski's reputation as one of cinema's most difficult and volatile actors was well established long before The Great Silence, but his behavior during this production created one of the most disturbing incidents of his career. Kinski, who played the film's sadistic villain Loco, had a confrontation with American actor Frank Wolf, who portrayed the well-meaning Sheriff Burnett in the film. According to multiple accounts from the set, Kinski directed hateful anti-Semitic remarks at Wolf, specifically telling him, "I don't want to work with a filthy Jew like you. I'm German and hate Jews." The comment was shocking and vicious, and Wolf's reaction was immediate and physical. Other cast and crew members had to physically restrain Wolf from strangling Kinski on the spot. The incident created an incredibly tense atmosphere on set, and understandably, Wolf refused to speak to Kinski for the remainder of the production except when absolutely required by the script. Director Sergio Corbucci had to carefully manage the two actors to keep them separated as much as possible. What makes this incident even more bizarre is Kinski's later justification for his behavior. When asked about the incident years afterward, Kinski claimed that he had deliberately insulted Wolf because he wanted to help the actor get into character. This explanation is deeply problematic on multiple levels. There was nothing in Sheriff Burnett's character that required Wolf to experience genuine hatred or anti-Semitic abuse. The sheriff was meant to be a somewhat naive but good-hearted lawman trying to bring order to a corrupt town, not someone dealing with ethnic persecution. Kinski's excuse seems like a transparent attempt to retroactively justify inexcusable behavior by framing it as an unconventional method acting technique. Fact 7. The downbeat ending was the star's idea. One of the most infamous and discussed aspects of The Great Silence is its shockingly bleak ending, where the hero fails, the villains win, and all the innocent characters are massacred without hope or redemption. This conclusion was so radical for a Western that it became the film's defining characteristic and the main reason it was rejected by American distributors. But here's the surprising truth. This devastating finale wasn't actually in the original script. According to reports from the production, it was lead actor Jean-Louis Trintignant who suggested the downbeat ending just as filming was about to wrap up. The original screenplay apparently had a more conventional conclusion that would have been more palatable to mainstream audiences, though exactly what that ending looked like has been lost to history. Trintignant, who had agreed to do the film partly as a favor to producer Robert Dorfman, a friend of his, apparently felt that the dark and cynical tone of the story demanded an equally dark conclusion. Director Sergio Corbucci, who was already inclined toward pessimistic storytelling and had political motivations for making an anti-establishment Western, embraced Trintignant's suggestion enthusiastically. The timing of this decision was crucial, as it came so late in production that there was no opportunity for the studio or financiers to object before the ending was filmed. By the time producers and distributors saw the finished film, it was too late to change it, though they would later force Corbucci to shoot alternative endings for certain markets. Trintignant himself has been somewhat contradictory in interviews about his feelings toward the film, at times suggesting he didn't particularly enjoy the experience of making it, yet his contribution to the ending created one of the most memorable and discussed finales in Western cinema. Fact 8. It was remade as a Japanese samurai series. The influence of The Great Silence extended far beyond Italy and Europe, reaching all the way to Japan, where it inspired a complete reimagining in a different cultural context. In 1973, just 5 years after the film's release, a Japanese television series called Oshi Samurai, which translates to Mute Samurai, premiered starring the legendary Shintaro Katsu. Katsu was already famous for playing Zatoichi, the blind swordsman who became one of Japanese cinema's most iconic characters. The Mute Samurai series ran for 26 episodes and directly adapted the core concept of the Great Silence, transplanting it from the American West to feudal Japan. The series followed Kichi Hogan, a mute ronin and bounty hunter who, like Silence, could not speak due to trauma from his past. Just as Silence had his throat cut as a child after witnessing his parents' murder, Kichi was rendered mute by violence and carries that physical and psychological scar throughout the series. The parallels between the two works are striking and deliberate. Both protagonists are skilled with weapons. Both work as hired guns despite their disabilities. And both are portrayed as tragic figures operating in corrupt societies. The series even incorporated Western elements directly into its samurai framework. In later episodes, Kichi acquires a Western-style revolver, Orosu, which he uses with the same deadly precision as his katana sword. Shintaro Katsu not only starred in the series, but also produced it and directed the first episode, while his brother Tomisaburo Wakayama played the lead role of Kichi. The connection between spaghetti westerns and Japanese samurai films had always been strong, with Sergio Leone's Fistful of Dollars being an unauthorized remake of Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, so this reverse adaptation represented the genre influences coming full circle. Fact 9. Loco was based on a vampire. Klaus Kinski's chilling portrayal of the villain Loco is widely considered one of the best antagonist performances in spaghetti western history, and there's a specific reason why the character feels so unsettling and different from typical western bad guys. Director Sergio Corbucci deliberately modeled Loco's characterization after a vampire, specifically the vampire Gorka played by Boris Karloff in Mario Bava's horror anthology film Black Sabbath from 1963. This wasn't a random choice, but rather a calculated decision to make Loco feel less like a human villain and more like a predatory creature. In Black Sabbath, Karloff's vampire character moves with a certain cold grace and speaks in a deceptively calm and polite manner while being utterly ruthless and devoid of genuine human empathy. Corbucci wanted those exact qualities for Loco, and you can see them throughout the film. Unlike the loud, explosive villains common in westerns, Loco is soft-spoken, almost charming in his interactions with townspeople, and maintains an eerily civilized demeanor even while committing horrific acts of violence. He keeps a ledger book where he carefully records each person he kills for bounty money, treating murder as nothing more than a business transaction. This vampiric quality extends to the way Loco operates in the story. He preys on the desperate outlaws hiding in the mountains around Snow Hill, picking them off one by one and draining the life from the community just as a vampire would drain blood from victims. The influence of Black Sabbath was significant for Corbucci, who used that film as a major stylistic reference for the Great Silence's visual approach and tone. Fact 10. A happy ending was shot for Christmas. When Sergio Corbucci delivered his finished film with its devastatingly bleak ending to the producers, they immediately panicked about the commercial prospects of such a downbeat conclusion. The film was scheduled for release in Italy in November of 1968, just in time for the Christmas holiday season, and producers desperately wanted the movie to have what they called seasonal appeal. The idea of releasing an ultra-violent Western where everyone dies horribly right before Christmas seemed like box office suicide. Under pressure from the nervous producers, Corbucci reluctantly agreed to shoot an alternative happy ending, though he deliberately made it as absurd and unconvincing as possible to show his contempt for the idea. In this alternate version, Sheriff Burnett, who had seemingly drowned after being trapped under a frozen lake earlier in the film, miraculously appears alive and rides into town at the last possible moment. He shoots Loco in the head before the villain can kill Silence, giving the wounded hero enough time to eliminate all the remaining bounty killers. Pauline then removes the bandages from Silence's burnt right hand to reveal he had been wearing an iron gauntlet underneath for protection, showing he had planned for this confrontation. Burnett frees all the captured outlaws and asks Silence to become his deputy, which Silence accepts with a broad, beaming smile, the only time in the entire film that the character shows any happiness whatsoever. The ending was so jarringly different from the tone of the rest of the movie that it felt like it belonged in an entirely different film. For years, it was believed this happy ending was created specifically for the North African and Japanese markets, but research has since revealed it was simply made to appease producers who wanted options. Fact 11. It never saw U.S. theaters for 33 years. Despite being completed in 1968 and achieving moderate success in parts of Europe, The Great Silence didn't receive a theatrical release in the United States for more than 3 decades. After Darryl Zanuck's violent rejection of the film at 20th Century Fox, American distributors simply had no interest in releasing a Western where the bad guys win and all the heroes die. This was particularly frustrating because spaghetti westerns had become popular in America thanks to Clint Eastwood's success in Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy, and there was definitely an audience for Italian westerns. But The Great Silence was considered too dark, too violent, and too nihilistic for American tastes. The film circulated among serious cinephiles and collectors who sought out imported copies or bootleg versions, building a cult reputation over the years. Film scholars and Western enthusiasts knew about it and discussed it as a legendary lost masterpiece, but most American moviegoers had absolutely no opportunity to see it. The situation finally changed in 2001 when Fantoma Films and Image Entertainment released The Great Silence on DVD, marking the first time it was officially available in the United States in any format. This DVD release introduced the film to a whole new generation of viewers and critics who immediately recognized it as a groundbreaking work. The film's reputation grew steadily, and in 2012, more than 4 decades after it was made, The Great Silence finally received its first proper American theatrical release. This came at a perfect time. Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained had just revived interest in spaghetti westerns, and audiences were hungry for the original films that influenced Tarantino's work. Fact 12. Tarantino made his Hateful Eight. Because of this, Quentin Tarantino has never hidden his love for The Great Silence, and the influence of Sergio Corbucci's masterpiece is all over his 2015 film, The Hateful Eight. In fact, Tarantino has specifically listed The Great Silence at number 14 on his personal list of the top 20 spaghetti westerns of all time, and many film scholars consider The Hateful Eight to be as much a remake or homage as it is an original work. The connections between the two films are extensive and impossible to miss. Both movies feature snowy, wintry settings that were extremely unusual for westerns, which traditionally took place in hot desert environments. Both stories revolve around ruthless bounty hunters operating in corrupt systems where legal authorities are either absent or ineffective. Both films explore themes of justice, revenge, and the way vulnerable people are exploited by those in power. Most significantly, Tarantino hired Ennio Morricone, the same composer who created the haunting score for The Great Silence, to write an original score for The Hateful Eight. This was actually the first time Tarantino had commissioned an entirely original score for one of his films, as he typically used existing music from other movies. Morricone won an Academy Award for his work on The Hateful Eight, and the music consciously echoes the melancholic funeral tone of his Great Silence soundtrack. Beyond these surface elements, The Hateful Eight also shares the earlier film's cynical worldview and its refusal to provide easy moral answers or comforting conclusions. Tarantino has stated that he originally conceived The Hateful Eight as a sequel novel to Django Unchained titled Django in White Hell, which makes the connection to winter westerns and The Great Silence even more explicit. Fact 13. Corbucci wanted to go skiing. Behind all the artistic and political motivations for making The Great Silence, there was also a much more mundane and amusing reason why director Sergio Corbucci chose to set his western in the snowy mountains of the Italian Dolomites. According to multiple accounts from the production, Corbucci was an avid skier who loved visiting ski resorts, and he saw the location shooting as an opportunity to combine his work with his favorite leisure activity. The Dolomites region of northern Italy is famous for its world-class ski resorts, and Corbucci made sure that filming took place during the winter season when the slopes would be in perfect condition. While the cast and crew endured freezing temperatures and difficult shooting conditions in the snow-covered mountains, Corbucci would take advantage of breaks in filming to hit the slopes. The director had actually wanted to shoot his earlier film Django in a snowy setting, but had been prevented by budget constraints, which forced him to settle for muddy locations instead. When The Great Silence came along with better financing due to the success of Django, Corbucci finally got his wish to make a snow western, and the skiing opportunities were definitely part of the appeal. This isn't to say that Corbucci's choice was purely selfish or frivolous. The snowy setting became absolutely integral to the film's visual identity and thematic content, creating a landscape that perfectly matched the story's cold, unforgiving tone. But it's entertaining to know that while Corbucci was crafting this bleak, politically charged meditation on injustice and the failure of heroism, he was also thinking about getting in some good skiing runs between takes. Fact 14. The gun was anachronistically early. One of the most distinctive visual elements of The Great Silence is the unique weapon carried by the mute gunslinger, Silence, a Mauser C96 semi-automatic pistol, nicknamed the broom handle because of its distinctive wooden grip that extends down from the base of the handle. This rapid-firing pistol gave Silence a significant advantage in gunfights, as it could fire multiple shots in quick succession without needing to cock the hammer between each shot like a traditional revolver. The weapon was housed in a wooden box that doubled as a holster, creating an iconic image that became synonymous with the character. However, there's a significant historical problem with Silence using this particular weapon in a story set in 1898. The Mauser C96 was first manufactured in 1896, which means it had only been in existence for 2 years when the events of The Great Silence take place. In 1898, the Mauser C96 would have been an extremely new and rare weapon, certainly not something a wandering gunslinger in the remote mountains of Utah would likely possess. It would have been cutting-edge technology that few people in the American West would have even seen, let alone owned. The production of these pistols was initially limited, and they were primarily sold to military officers and wealthy individuals in Europe, not to frontier gunfighters in America. While Western films have never been particularly concerned with strict historical accuracy when it comes to weapons and technology, this particular anachronism is notable because it's so close to being plausible. If the film had been set just a few years later, the weapon would have made perfect sense. Fact 15. It was a political allegory for recent murders. When Sergio Corbucci conceived The Great Silence in 1967 and filmed it in late 1967 and early 1968, he was deeply affected by recent world events that shaped the film's dark, pessimistic worldview. The director explicitly stated that the film was inspired by and dedicated to the assassinations of revolutionary leaders who had been killed in the preceding years. In October of 1967, just months before filming began, Che Guevara, the Argentinian Marxist revolutionary who had become an international icon of rebellion against capitalism and imperialism, was captured and executed by the Bolivian military with support from the CYA. The previous year, Malcolm X, the influential African-American civil rights leader and activist, had been assassinated in February of 1965. Both deaths had profound impacts on left-wing intellectuals and artists in Europe, including Corbucci, who saw them as proof that revolutionary change was impossible because powerful established forces would always crush those who challenged the system. The Great Silence functions as a direct allegory for this political reality. The outlaws hiding in the mountains represent oppressed people trying to survive in an unjust system. Loco and the bounty killers represent the violent enforcers who maintain that system through legalized murder. The corrupt banker Pollicut represents capitalism and greed. Sheriff Burnett represents well-meaning but ultimately powerless authorities who can't stop the violence. And Silence himself represents the revolutionary hero who tries to protect the vulnerable but is ultimately destroyed by the overwhelming power of the system he's fighting against. The film's bleak ending, where everyone dies and the villains walk away triumphant, was Corbucci's statement that in the real world evil often wins. Evil often wins. Evil often wins. Evil often wins.